New York Attorney General Letitia James scored a major win in her civil suit against former President Donald Trump and some of his adult children on Tuesday, as a judge ruled the GOP frontrunner had indeed been committing fraud for years. The judge found that the former president and his company deceived banks, insurers, and others by massively overvaluing his assets and exaggerating his net worth on paperwork used in making deals and securing financing, reported the Associated Press Tuesday. The judge's summary judgment found Trump liable for the key claim in James' lawsuit, alleging Trump committed fraud by inflating his assets by billions of dollars since 2011. The AP added that the judge ruled Trump, his company, and key executives repeatedly lied about the value of assets on his annual financial statements, reaping rewards such as favorable loan terms and lower insurance premiums. James is suing the Trump Organization for $250 million in penalties and to ban Trump and his adult children from doing business in New York. Ivanka Trump was dismissed from the case in June. The suit is now set to go to a non-jury trial starting October 2nd, in which the judge will decide on the remaining allegations in James's suit and on the penalty Trump and his company may pay. Lawyers for Trump are vowing to appeal the case. Former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti joins us to discuss what this means for the GOP frontrunner. Renato, can you break this down? What is this case and what's at stake for Donald Trump?
Well, actually, this is a fraud case that originally was investigated by the Manhattan DA's office as a criminal case. It was ultimately brought by the New York Attorney General. And essentially, the allegations are that the Trump Organization would inflate the valuation of assets for certain purposes, let's say for lenders, and would potentially have a different valuation that it would be giving to tax authorities. So there was a fraudulent scheme there. And what the judge found here is that the evidence was strong enough in a civil case, obviously a different standard than in a criminal case, but in a civil case, that the evidence was so strong that he granted summary judgment against the Trump Organization. And essentially what that means is that there's no issue of material fact. Like basically the facts are established and they lose. So he has found that the Trump Organization has committed fraud, and a number of individuals, including Trump's, the former president, Eric Trump, and others committed fraud. And the judge has ordered a number of very substantial remedies against the Trump Organization and various companies. The judge has dissolved some of the companies that were formed under New York law. He has appointed a former judge to oversee the Trump Organization, and has also essentially prevented the Trump Organization from doing certain types of business within New York State.
Could Trump face jail time?
Trump could definitely face jail time for one of the 4 criminal indictments he's already facing in other jurisdictions, but not for this case. This case started as a criminal matter by the Manhattan DA. Very famously or infamously, depending on your perspective, the Manhattan DA decided not to pursue charges in this matter, Alvin Bragg. There was a book written about it and a lot of controversy. Ultimately, of course, he brought a different case, a different indictment about the hush money payments. But, ultimately, this is a case where it's a civil case only, and that is why you saw in depositions, executives, including, for example, Eric Trump, taking the fifth hundreds and hundreds of times, and that was used against them in this case, and is part of the reason why they have liability.
So Trump inflated his net worth by as much as $2.23 billion, and by one measure as much as $3.6 billion on annual financial statements given to banks and insurers. What could those repercussions be? You spoke about some of this. Is there any other things that Trump and his son could face, Eric Trump?
So certainly I would expect that the Trumps are going to face accusations from lenders and potential litigation from lenders. I wouldn't be surprised if lenders ultimately decide that there's a breach. Essentially, there's a breach of various covenants that were made in their loan documents and in the loans that they have, and ultimately determine that that they are going to take an action to essentially pull those loans and potentially end lines of credit that are necessary for any real estate developer to stay in business. So I think there'll be very significant potential financial considerations for the Trump organization. And of course, there are other, potential downsides as well. For example, obtaining additional loans, additional lines of credit, being able to do business with other counterparties. You have a finding, and this is not the first, that there have been essentially wrongdoing committed by the Trump organization. Anyone who chooses to do business with them is going to be aware of this and is going to have to decide that they're going to take on that risk in order to continue to do business with them.
Does this mean Trump could lose the following properties: Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, very famous, Trump Tower Triplex in Manhattan, Trump Park Avenue in Manhattan, 40 Wall Street, Manhattan, Seven Springs Estates in New York, and his golf course in Scotland?
I think he has to be concerned about losing properties. I mean, this is a situation that actually really requires a very careful management on the defense side, because there's going to be an appeal for sure. But in the meantime, there are what's called receivers that are appointed for these dissolved LLCs. There's these limited liability corporations that were dissolved by the judge. A receiver is an outside person who comes in and basically manages the assets. You have this former judge that you have to deal with who's overseeing the matter. So Trump is going to be limited in what he can do with certain types of properties. He's potentially going to be facing claims from creditors. And of course, at the exact same time, he's facing criminal indictments in 4 different jurisdictions. So he has a lot of problems. Yeah, it's a lot. He's got a lot to deal with. He's been fighting a war on many different fronts. And in many ways, he is in this mess right now because he had a focus on those other more serious matters, because going to prison is even more serious than these problems. And that is why I think he ended up where he is here today.
And finally, could Trump lose the entire Trump organization?
I think that is not likely. I think what will happen is that the Trump organization is going to sell assets. It's going to reform potentially in another state. But it's going to take a very significant hit. I mean, the Trump organization is based in New York. It's a New York company, is comprised of and affiliated with many other New York companies, and not being able to conduct business the way it would like in the state of New York, and having, for example, a monitor watching its activity is going to constrain its activities. And there's no way in which anyone could spin this as being good for Donald Trump's business. It is only a problem and a constraint because businesses need to act quickly. They need to respond to things that are going on in the market, and having to deal with a monitor and to deal with legal problems is only downside for business.
Well, thank you for your insight and for joining us.
Thank you.
For more news you need to know today, go to Mediaite.com and subscribe to our YouTube page.